everybody, Doc here. Today we're going to do a little Lego math, but before we get started, let's talk about a couple of things. If you're live with us right now, I'm going to ask questions here and there and tell you to put your answers in the chat. If you're watching this later and not live, you can still participate by putting your answers in the comments section. So let's get started. First, what's fraction? Fraction is a part of something. So let's say I order some pizzas and then I have friends over for pizza and we all get some of the pizza, not one person eats all of it. So in that case, you could say I ate a fraction of the pizza. Or let's watch a movie later, and once we watch the movie, we might not get to the end. If we don't get to the end of the movie and we did not watch the whole movie, then we watched a fraction of the movie. So fraction just means part, that's all. So let's do some Legos math. First, let's see, how many Legos do I have here on the screen? It's a little hard to count them right now when they're all messy. So let's put them in order a little bit. No particular way, just a little straightened up so we can count them better. That should be better. See if you can count the Legos. Count the Legos and put the number of Legos in the chat. I got 17 Legos. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Now that number is important because that's how many total Legos we have. $17 total Legos. Now let's organize the Legos that we do have. Let's see. Let's see how many orange Legos we have. So I'm looking at all of these Legos, and to see them a little better, I'm going to put the orange ones next to each other. Now, can you answer in the chat and tell me how many orange Legos do we have? I got 3 orange Legos. Now let's try yellow Legos. How many yellow Legos do we have? Go ahead and put your answer in the chat if you'd like. I see 1 yellow Lego. Now let's try green. I'm going to have to move these other Legos out of my way. Okay, count the green Legos and tell me in the chat how many green Legos do you see here? I count 4 green Legos. Now, how do we write this as a fraction? It's actually not too hard. We know that we have 17 total Legos. That's important. If I want to know what fraction of those Legos are orange, I take how many orange Legos that I have, which is 3, and I just put them over 17, and when we read this, we could say 3 out of 17. 3 out of 17. Now we can write that as words as well. Let's take a look at our yellow Legos. I only have 1 yellow Lego. So if I wanted to write that as a fraction, I could write 1 out of 17. 1 out of 17. So I could either write it like this with the orange, or I could write it in words. Now my green Legos, 4 out of 17. Now, again, we could write that in words as 4 out of 17. Or you can use the slash bar on your keyboard and write it like this. And that's also a way to write a fraction. Let's try something else. How about we organize them by shape? I still have all 17 of my Legos here. But this time, I'm going to organize them by shape. What shapes do we have? We have squares and we have rectangles. So let's talk about what that is. A square is a figure that has 4 sides that are all the same. Our 4 sides are all the same. But in order for it to also be a square, the corners have to be straight like this. We call that right angle, but all you have to do is make sure that your corners are straight and all your sides are the same, and then it's a square. A rectangle is similar, but it has one short side, or one of the sides are shorter than the other sides. So what I mean here is that, see how these 2 sides are shorter than these 2 sides? That's what makes this a rectangle. So a rectangle also has corners that have right angles that look like this. So we have squares and we have rectangles, both here with our Legos. So let's organize our Legos a little bit into these 2 categories. Here we have rectangles. We have some different sizes, but that's okay. There. I've got my rectangles toward the top, and I've got my squares toward the bottom. How many squares do I have? Doesn't matter whether they're small or big. Let's just see how many total squares I have. 1, 2, 3, you can count with me, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Wow, I have 12. Let's double count that to make sure I didn't mess up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. It's always good to double check. So I have 12 squares. What about my rectangles? My rectangles, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Rectangles, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I have 5 rectangles. Now, if I want to write those as fractions, I could say I have 12 out of 17. 12 out of 17. That would be my fraction for my squares. Now let's look at the rectangles. Rectangles, I have 5 out of 17. 5 out of 17. So this is how I would write my answers for what fractional part I have of squares and what fractional part I have of rectangles. Now I want to organize them again and give you a chance to try. So this time, instead of just doing squares and rectangles, let's do small squares and big squares. So I have small squares, and then I have big squares. So I'm going to move my rectangles out of the way for now because we don't need them. I still have 17 total Legos though, but I'm just looking at my squares. I'm going to organize my squares into big and small. Okay, I want you to put in the chat, how many big squares do I have? How many big squares do I have total? I got 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 big squares. Hopefully you got the same. How many small squares do we have? Go ahead and put your answer in the chat. I counted 5. I have 5 small squares. Hopefully you got the same. Now, write those as a fraction. I want you to put your answer in the chat. You can either write out of or you can use your slash. So let me see you write a fraction. Let's do the small squares first. We know there are 5. Tell me what the fraction looks like. Put your answer in the chat, or if you're watching later on, you can put the answer in the comment section. Okay, let's see how you did. Did you put 5 out of 17 like this? Or you might have wrote it out in words. If you did, that's okay too. You'd write 5 out of 17. So you could either write it like this or like this. Let's try one more time. Let's look at the big squares. Again, for the big squares, the total is still the same. We still have 17 total Legos. But now we just want to look at the big squares. And I want you to now put it in the chat, a fraction of what the big squares would be. Now, if you wrote it in words, you would write 7 out of 17. Or maybe you used a slash on your keyboard and then you'd write 7/17. And just so we don't forget, both of those together, if we were writing it on paper, would look like 7 out of 17, like this. So we have 3 ways of looking at the same meaning. How did you do? Let's go back and add on our rectangles. Bring them back down here. And if we're going to look at just our rectangles, we have big and small rectangles also. So I have big rectangles and small rectangles. Now, it doesn't matter whether or not I have my rectangles like this or whether I have them like this. This is called vertical and this is called horizontal, but it's still a rectangle. So let's take a look at our small rectangles first. See how you're doing, and I would like you to, in the chat, put how to write the small rectangles. First, you have to know how many small rectangles that you have. So we're going to separate the small ones from the big ones. Hopefully you see that there are 2 small rectangles. Now write it as a fraction. Maybe you've already done this. 2 out of 17. I still have 17 total Legos. What about my big rectangles? I have 3 big rectangles. So as a fraction, that would be 3 out of 17. Did you get that? Okay. Now, I hope you enjoyed this today. I have one less question to ask you, and I want you to make sure that you answer, because this is how I'm going to take your attendance and know that you watched the whole video. I want you to take a look at these really closely, and I'm going to mix up these Legos. And I want you to tell me how many of these Legos are exactly the same. How many of these Legos are exactly the same? Go ahead and do that now. How many of the Legos are exactly the same? Put it in the chat, or if you're watching on YouTube, you can put it in the comment section. Now, after you write how many Legos are exactly the same, I want you to tell me what fraction of Legos are exactly the same. What fraction of Legos are exactly the same? This is where you'll write it as a fraction. What fraction of Legos are exactly the same? Put your answer in the chat or put it in the comment section. I want to thank you again for participating today. And by the way, if you don't know the answer to the question, just put you don't know. That way I still know that you watched the video and you participated it somehow. Okay? So this is Doc signing off, and I'll see you next time.